Approaches to managing anxiety. We're going to talk about some practices today. And when we talk about practices in relation to the whole issue of anxiety, we're really talking therapeutically. We're talking about ways that you and I can address the anxiety instead of addressing what motivated the anxiety. I'm sure that some of you all have heard me say that alcohol or the drugs, shopping, eating, etc., 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 those are not problems. They are symptoms of problems. And so is anxiety. Anxiety is not the problem. Anxiety is a symptom of the problem. So when we are dealing with ways to manage anxiety, these may be short-term, temporary fixes. The real way to manage anxiety is to eradicate what is causing the anxiety. Now, sometimes that's long-term work and sometimes that's short-term work. It really depends on who you are and how you choose to respond to stimuli. Some of us take a long time to learn lessons, and some of us don't take quite so long. Now, if you're a fast learner, you don't have to understand it to accept it, to own it, and to do it. If you're slightly slower, you tend to resist the message, and you have this illusion that you have to understand it before you can accept it. Fast learners don't even bother to understand it. They accept it, they use it, and they understand it as it begins to work for them. In one of the holy books it says and this is the Bible, to learn your lessons quickly. Well, you learn your lessons quickly by not wasting energy understanding. You'll get it. You will get understanding. It will come with time. Practicing truth will bring understanding. So when we talk about approaches to manage anxiety today, we're talking about ways to sort of like temporarily deal with it until what? The behavior modification or the emotional and cognitive processes can be transformed, reconciled, or until we actually detach from either of the investments. And I think that's the best way, because that's the way towards transcendence. Many of you all have heard about cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, and 12 steps. And these are probably the three major therapeutic approaches to managing anxiety. When I say therapeutic, I'm talking psychotherapeutic. I'm talking about going to the clinic, going somewhere, sitting down, talking with a therapist, someone who has been trained perhaps in these skills. So let's just sort of look at them and understand what they mean and why we would use them. When we talk about cognitive behavior therapy and anxiety, probably the key word that comes to mind is reframing. Reframing. What does that mean? We're changing the lens. We're changing the way we're looking at it. The situation hasn't changed. Our perception, our perspective has changed. Now, that could lead to transcendence if indeed the perspective is not temporarily changed but permanently changed. So what do? Instead of seeing the glass as half empty, oh, by the way, which is a deficit, which is a grievance, which is seen as a loss, which is going to bring anxiety, instead I'm going to see the glass as half full, which is what? Establishing it as a gift, establishing it as a completion, establishing it in a way of being fulfilled. And if I can change that perspective, what? My level of anxiety, well, the level of anxiety is going to what? Be minimized, if not go away, because what? I'm not feeling vulnerable. So there's no inconsistency between the way my real self exists and how I'm seeing the situation. I'm seeing it as half full, hey, just a matter of filling it up. If I see it as half empty, I'm going to see it as a grievance. I'm going to see it as a loss. And whenever I see anything as a deficit or a loss, I am going to suffer anxiety. So with the cognitive behavior therapeutic intervention, we would say what? We have what we call irrational beliefs. An irrational belief is seen as something that causes disutility, it causes distress, and it is relative to the believer. I can't decide what your irrational belief systems are. You can't decide what mine are. You got yours, I got mine. They're unique to who we are. When we know an irrational belief exists is when it brings anxiety. If I have a belief that is bringing me anxiety, then what's going to happen? I am going to have to change that belief, because that belief is irrational to my peace. It's irrational to my utility. That's what makes it irrational. It's causing me problems. It's causing me anxiety. Now, many times, instead of changing the belief, we've talked about this before, I'll mask the anxiety. But with cognitive behavior therapy, we would what? Change the perception. We would change the perception from grievance and loss to gift and celebration. And that's basically what's going on. Albert Ellis talks about it in terms of rational emotional behavior therapy. He identifies what? The rational, the perception, the thinking process, the cognition. Changing that will what? Change emotion. Now, the emotion, as you may have realized from an earlier broadcast, emotion is can be categorized in 4 areas: happy, sad, angry, and afraid. Now, when we talk about rational emotional behavior therapy, our perception is going to determine the kind of emotion that is evoked. I might see something that makes me happy, but I also might see myself what? Vulnerable relative to what I'm perceiving makes me happy. So rather than have a functional form of happiness, which would be pleased, I can share and receive, I'm going to what? Be excited. I'm going to be excited. I'm feeling vulnerable, but I'm feeling happy. So the way I'm seeing it will determine the emotion and the level of intensity or dysfunctionality. The more intense the emotion, the more dysfunctional it is. Some people say, I'm just emotional. Nope, you're just intense in relation to your emotion, which means you're anxious. You see, I am extremely emotional. No, you're just extremely anxious. Borderline personality people, you know, the ones who are really, really happy, really, really sad, really, really angry, and really, really afraid. They're always in the low functioning component of any emotion. Now, cognitive behavior therapy would say what? Now, we can't deal with them. Why? Because their anxiety level keeps them dysfunctional. Cognitive behavior can deal with functional levels of anxiety. And remember Murray Bowen, who had this scale in relation to anxiety. Well, you know, if it's at 100% anxiety, I'm kind of like the Tasmanian devil. I mean, there's just no controlling me. If if my anxiety is at 0, I'm kind of like Data or Spock, you know. No anxiety at all. Well, somewhere in between are you and I. And we have different levels. Some of us have levels of anxiety that allow us to recognize our thoughts. Why? Because they haven't been really contaminated by intense emotions. The emotions are not at 0 in relation to anxiety, but they're not at 100 either. They might not even be at 80. Might be at a 30. If I'm at a 30, I can pretty much function. I can think pretty rationally, and I can use my emotions to my advantage. But if I'm up there between 80 and 100, hey, I'm a raving lunatic. I'm not going to think. When the emotion is intensified because of irrational beliefs, we can't step in and change the irrational beliefs because the intensified emotion contaminates the processing of thoughts, and cognitive behavior therapy falls apart. We can't convince that person. We can't help that person see that the glass could be half full. Why? Because they're freaking out because they see it as half empty, and their level of anxiety is so high that they don't want to hear the possibility that it could be half full. Cognitive behavior falls apart when people are chronically and extremely anxious. So you have this thing called dialectical behavior therapy. Now, Marsha Lanahan is wonderful because she introduces this. We needed something to deal with people that we couldn't do a cognitive behavior therapeutic intervention on, so we have dialectical behavior therapy. And that, well, quite honestly, if you read the 21st century interpretation of cognitive behavior, it's really dialectical behavior. This is where the mindfulness comes in. This is where the meditation comes in. This is where the yoga comes in. This is where the Tibetan bowls come in. This is, this is where we sort of, induce these mind-altering, mood-altering states through the breath, through the breathing. They're wonderful techniques. I hope that I don't seem like I'm making fun of them, but I'm just responding to how people respond when you offer those as substitutes in relation to what? Just addressing the anxiety. How would you feel if someone said, I had a hard day, I need to go home and breathe? It would seem odd. Why? Because it's just not part of our society. We know, because we learned it probably from our parents, our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, our friends, that when we have a hard day, we go home and have a drink. Well, we're masking it. At least with dialectical behavioral approaches or 21st century cognitive behavioral approaches, we can use elements that are free and they're cheap. I often say to people, why would you spend your money on alcohol and drugs or ice cream or on clothing or on housing items when, you're really just trying to get rid of your anxiety? If you're going to get rid of your anxiety, why don't you use something cheap and legal? You know what I mean? Something that you don't have to go bankrupt, to do, like air. Air is a wonderful thing. It keeps you alive. You're already addicted to it. See, you can't live without air, so why not use that to get you high? Because, see, since you're already addicted to it, and right now it is free, and it's pretty safe, you know what I mean? Why not use it to take you in this mind-altered, mood-altered state so you can calm your nerves, so you can think clearly? I think that makes more sense than me eating a half gallon of ice cream every time I get upset. That makes you fat. Or me having a drink every time I get upset, that makes you alcoholic. Or me doing over-the-counter drugs, licit, or illegal drugs, illicit drugs, that makes you addicted. Why go to the mall and spend up all your money? That makes you broke. Why not use air? It's free and it is already an element to which we're addicted. Thank God they're not bottling it. Thank God they're not selling it, because then we would all be what? Indulging in at-risk criminal and sexual and any other kind of behavior to have it. Why? Because it's one of those goods that is essential. And with an essential good, no matter how expensive it gets, we still need it. So since air is so essential, and since we can use things like air to move us into a mind-altered, mood-altered state that would reduce anxiety, why wouldn't you use air? Yeah, it does make sense when you really think about it. It increases the endorphins. Most of us, a lot of us know about that because we talk about the runner's high. What do you think a runner's high is about? The body is oxygenated and the endorphin levels are increased, and what? It relaxes you. Well, you don't have to be running laps. You don't have to be running through City Park or other parks. You can sit in your own house, relaxed, and do breathing exercises and get as much of a high that any runner would ever get. In some of our addiction classes, we actually use the techniques, and it's amazing how people, just through simple breathing exercises, they can get high from being stimulated or in relation to a depressed state. It doesn't matter. There are breathing exercises that you can use for either one. So that's just one example of what we would call a dialectical behavioral technique. And the breath is sort of like also a precedent. It precedes a prelude to, say, meditation. Because you see, when I do breathing exercises and I get relaxed enough, what happens? My ego shuts down. I'm reaching that stillful state, that stillness state that I'm instructed to do what? Be still and know that I am God. When I start my breathing exercises, my ego shuts down and I am still. I'm not thinking, I'm not worried. I'm just like that baby that just landed on planet Earth. I'm really not conscious about much of anything. And here is where I can go into this mind-altered, mood-altered state where I can hear from God, who happens to be, by the way, spirit, who happens to be, by the way, energy, who happens to be nonsensical. So, you know, I can do that. And that's what dialectical behavior will do for you and for me. So we have, you know, that technique. Now, there's another technique that is right up there with cognitive behavior and dialectical behavior. They call it the 12 steps. Yeah, y'all know about those 12 steps. Some of y'all do. Some of you know all 12 of the steps. Now, you might be at step 4, but you can repeat all 12 of the steps. The bottom line is, in relation to approaches to managing anxiety, the 12 steps can work as long as you don't get too hung up in that first step. You know, that first step is where you got to own the behavior. You got to own the fact that you did it. Now, here's my problem. You know, I'll challenge anybody. Here's my problem with AA and the 12 steps. AA will have you stuck in that first step to the point where the second step can't do its work. You see, yeah, I got to own the fact that I did whatever it is that I did. I got to own the fact that I am in the predicament that I'm in. Otherwise, I can't move on. I can't move to point B until I, what, own the fact that I'm at point A. But once I get to point B, why do I have to keep still owning point A? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And quiet as it's kept, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to a whole bunch of people in NACAN, AA, and all the other A's. You know why? Because I can't transcend if I stay stuck in the past. And that's the problem with the 12 steps. But if we can reconcile the shame and the guilt that's associated with that first step, we got something going now, because I can move from the first step to the second step to the third step. Unfortunately, too many people who use 12 steps feel that they have to stay stuck in that first step. That's why, for many, when they consider themselves active in Alcoholics Anonymous, their name is so-and-so, and they're still a whatever it was that they were 10 years ago. Excuse me, don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. I might have been that, but I'm not that today. See, and I can do that if I can, what, get rid of the shame and the guilt associated with owning the reality of the first step. Yes, my name is Marjorie, and I am an Oreo-holic. Yep, I love Oreo cookies. That was 5 years ago. But now, I don't eat Oreo cookies anymore. I don't even think about eating Oreo cookies. So why am I going to still claim the reality that I eat Oreo cookies when that's gone? You see, the problem with the 12 steps is that it identifies contextual situations as reality when they're not. You see, when what I did 10 years ago is gone, it doesn't exist anymore. 10 years ago, I was 10 years younger. I'm never going to be 10 years younger again. I might look 10 years younger, but I'm not going to be 10 years younger. A few years ago, I was 10 years old. I'm never going to be 10 years old again. I don't walk around saying, my name is Marjorie Lewis and I'm 10 years old. No, my name is Marjorie Lewis and I'm the age that I am now. And I'm not going to tell you how old that is, but you get my meaning. I am not where I was at 10. And in relation to the 12 steps, I should not be where I was 5 years ago. If I stopped indulging in alcohol and drugs or cookies or candy or ice cream or shopping, and I have developed an infrastructure and a way of learning such that I don't even think about it, why do I keep reminding myself of it? I'm not that anymore. My name is Marjorie Lewis, and I don't even think about eating Oreo, so I'm no longer an Oreo-holic. I am a new person. I am a new creature. Every minute I am replenishing. You know, it's funny. We replenish all of our cells in a matter of months. Now, if all of my cells can be replenished, certainly old behavior can be replenished. Yep, just like I challenged Mary Bowen, I am challenging the 12-step process. It is dysfunctional, and it certainly does not make for a good transcending model in relation to addiction or anxiety. Yep. I said it. And I meant it. We got to throw the bathwater out, but we don't want to throw the baby out, because the 12 steps do have a value, as long as we don't overly identify with that first step. That first step should be a launching pad, not quicksand. It is not supposed to be something that I hold on to for the rest of my life. Like I told you not to cling to Christ, I'm telling you, don't cling to that first step. It is just as crippling as anything else. It too can become a crutch. It can become something that will keep you crippled for the rest of your life. Now that we've taken care of that, once I've moved from, I own the fact that I got a problem. And then I moved to the second step. And I realized what? I need a power greater than myself to handle this problem. Well, we already talked about that. You see, we need what? Spirit. We need omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. We need God. We need Allah. We need infinity. We need something beyond our ability to see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. No problem with that. But when you tap into that, it's going to remove the shame and the guilt. You got to be innocent in order to move on. Shame is what? When I have become what I did. Well, you know, that's just not reality. Guilt is when I take what? Full, absolute responsibility. You're just not powerful enough to be totally responsible for what you did. Whatever you're in, you had help. You had help. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to take your responsibility, but you can take full responsibility, because you're not omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. You're not God. You don't have the right to take full responsibility. So just get that irrational belief out of your head. Once we get those two things under control, the only thing left is innocence. And innocence says what? I'm not going to judge myself. Oh, and by the way, for you churchy people, you were told not to judge. God said, do not eat of the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then God in the New Testament says, don't judge. Let the wheat and the tares grow together. And those who are qualified to judge, and that's not you and me, on the appointed day, and this is not the appointed day, will make the judgment. So the reality is, we don't have a right to judge. And when we don't judge, we don't have anything left but innocence. There is no shame. There is no guilt. Those are two egomaniacal manifestations. There's only innocence. Now, when I say innocence, I'm not talking about irresponsibility. And I'm not talking about avoiding your share of the problem. But what I am saying is, you don't become dysfunctional in it and you take your ego out. I'm innocent. I'm just having an experience. Right. Yeah. I have indulged in alcohol. I have indulged in drugs. I have indulged in stealing. I have indulged in lying. I have indulged in all of these things. But I'm none of those things, you see. I'm just a human. I'm experiencing being human. I'm not a human being. I'm experiencing being human. And when I experience being human, I'm innocent. I'm innocent. In my humanity, I'm doing these things. But outside of my humanity, I'm transcending the traps. So I'm innocent. Yeah, I lied, but I'm still innocent. I indulged in the act, but I'm innocent of it. And when I'm innocent of it, it means what? I'm not shamed, I'm not guilty, but I did it. You see, and when I see myself as innocent, I can own the fact that I did it. That's what we need. That's what we need. And that's where we can improve on the 12 steps. I can move away from the first step when I don't get too attached to the dysfunctional behavior. Attachment to things that we like or things that we dislike cause anxiety, they cause problems. So when I can reconcile the first step through the usage of the second step, which is what? I came to recognize, realize the fact that I need a power greater than myself to stay sane. Remember now, somebody who's 100% anxious, they're like the Tasmanian devil. Crazy as a loon, crazy as a bedbug. Yeah, you need that power greater than yourself to have peace. That's where sanity is. Remember the functional forms of the emotions. Happy being what? Pleased, that's sane. Sad being sorrowful or melancholy, that's sane. Angry being irritated, that's sane. Fearful being alerted, that's sane. You got an insane extreme. Happy being excited. You know, you make bad mistakes when you're excited. Insane. Sad being depressed. You don't do nothing. That's insane. Angry being rage. Now you know that's insane. And fear being terror. Another form of what? Insanity. So we need need what? A power greater than ourselves to what? Keep our sanity, to keep us over in the functional form of our emotions, to minimize anxiety. And then it's uphill from there. I mean, we really got it going on. So just know that we have these 3 different techniques that are wonderful to a certain extent, but all of them fall short. But they do point us to transcendence. When we talk about breathing exercises, remember what? We're just getting ready to what? Hear from God. We're getting ready to move into a mind-altered, mood-altered state. Because when I deal with God, when I deal with infinity, when I deal with the essence of who I am and allow it to tap in with the infinity that exists, that surrounds me, I'm out of my mind. When I say out of my mind, I'm out of the left part of my mind. I'm out of my ego. I'm into the same state of being that a newborn baby comes into. That's when I hear from God. Just for the churchy people again, it says what? They that worship God must worship God in spirit and in truth. Not in ego, in spirit, in peace, and in truth. Which means what? If I'm going to get with God, I need to position myself so that I can commune. Now, you can talk to God for a while and confess. You can talk to infinity for a while and confess. You can talk to Allah for a while and confess. You can talk to the divine presence and spill it all out. But there comes a time when you need to sit down and shut up. You need to keep quiet so that God, infinity, Allah, the divine presence can talk to you. Yeah. And you do that in relation to what? Maybe a little meditation. And you use breathing as a precursor to the meditation, oxygenating yourself, increasing the endorphins so that what? You can be relaxed enough to hear. Yoga helps you get there. Motivational hearing, not speaking, but hearing. Nothing like a good motivational speech that you heard to what? Move you into another state of being and make you receptive. Prayer can help you do that. Oh, and by the way, your perception of God. Instead of clinging to God, communicating with God, allowing God to empower you, that can do it. These are just some approaches that we can use to what? Effectively manage our anxiety. Cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, and 12 steps, they can do transcendence if they are practiced and used appropriately by clinicians. But too often we kind of settle in for contingencies that are only temporary fixes. But we can use all 3 of those, and we can use them for transcendence, and thank God we can. Breathing exercises help what? Reduce our level of anxiety so we can sort of like tap into our inner being. Yoga does the same thing. Motivational hearing, not speaking, but hearing, praying, and remember our perception of God. We don't cling to God, we partner with God. We are empowered by God. I hope that some of these approaches sort of like enliven your curiosity, and I invite you to give me a call if you'd like to know more. Or you can just Google any of these and get some more insight. So I want to thank you for your time and for your energy, and I just want to thank you for any opportunity that I have had to encourage you in relation to resolving the issue of anxiety.